Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. He's my peace, Jesus. Burden bearer, Jesus. Heavy load sharer, Jesus. Heart fixer, Jesus. Mind regulator, Jesus. He's my peace, thank you, Lord. Hey, Jesus. Strong tower in my weakest hour. I love to call him Jesus. I love to call him Jesus. Early in the morning, Jesus. Late in the midnight hour, Jesus. Hey, Jesus. My deliverer. My protector, Jesus. My refuge. My provider, Jesus. He's everything I need. He's everything I need. I can call on him. Line is never too busy. Say, Jesus. Jehovah Jireh. Jehovah Nissi. Jehovah Shalom. Say, Jesus. The more I call him, said the better I feel, Jesus. Said the better I feel, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. He's my blessed Savior, Jesus. He's my blessed Savior, Jesus. Can't nobody do me like he can. Can't nobody do me like he can. Can't nobody do me like he can. Oh, Jesus. He's my rock. He's my sword and shield. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, Jesus. I love to call on him. He's everything I need. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, Jesus. Say, Jesus. Lord, I love you. I lift my hand to you, Jesus. You get all the glory. You get all the honor. Say, Jesus. Can't nobody do me like. Can't nobody hold me like. Can't nobody move me like. Say, Jesus. I love him, I love him, I love him. Lord, I appreciate all you done for me. All you moving blinded eyes. Say, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Hey, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Blessed Savior. He's worthy to be praised. Oh, yes, he is. Worthy to be praised. Hallelujah. 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 I love to call Jesus. I love to call Jesus. Hallelujah. He is our way maker. Hallelujah. He is our way maker. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. He is our way maker. He is our redeemer. He is our all in all. Jesus. 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 Hallelujah. He's everything we need. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Giving honor to Pastor Bill. Hallelujah. First Lady Sheila, Deacon James. Hallelujah. To all the ministry. Hallelujah. To the mothers, to all the saints, the dear children, everyone under the sound of my voice. Hallelujah. I magnify God for being God. Wow! Wow! Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, God. Giving honor to my husband in his absence and to my children. I just thank God for being here. Thank God for being a way maker. Hallelujah. I thank God for being a protector. Hallelujah. I thank God for being a divine healer. Hallelujah. I thank God for being a way of escape. Hallelujah. 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 Yes, sir. Hallelujah. 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 I thank God for being a very present help in the time of trouble. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Woo! Hallelujah. He's everything we need. Hallelujah. I don't doubt him. Hallelujah. I don't doubt him. I don't doubt him. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I believe just what he say. Hallelujah. A promise is a promise. He is our keeper. Hallelujah. 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 He is our way maker. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. He is our provider. He is our protector. Hallelujah. He is our shield.
NLT version. I hope this message encourages you as it encouraged me. Starting at verse 12, the Spirit then compelled Jesus to go into where? The wilderness, where he was tempted by Satan for 40 days. Now check out this, what it says next, saints. It says, he was out among the wild animals, number one. And number two, and the angels took care of him. From this passage of scriptures, we want to take for a topic, the wilderness. Brother Makai, where you at? Come here, son, real fast. Come here, real fast, real fast. You're not moving fast enough because I don't see you moving yet. Get the trumpet. I meant to have you blow it over earlier. Get the shofar, son. Give me 3 good toots. Thank you, son. Pastor, what was that? That's also dress rehearsal, because one day the trump of God gonna sound, and the dead in Christ shall rise. Want to get used to the sound. Want to get used to the sound. Good job, son. Thank you, thank you. Amen. Taking for a topic for this from this passage of the wilderness. The wilderness. So look at verse 12. We see where the Spirit compels Jesus to go where? Into the wilderness. Then the passage tells us, we looked at this last week, how when he was in the wilderness, he was tempted by Satan, not 1 day, not 2 days, but 40 days. But note how in verse 13, and you can really overlook this if you're not paying attention, but in verse 13, it says that Jesus was out among the wild animals, and the angels took care of him. I don't know about you, saints, but if you watch the news, you will see that we live in a wild, wicked, evil, and crazy world. We can even call what we live in today a modern day wilderness. Some people call it the iron jungle. You may not realize it or not, but every day we go out among wild animals, among wild people, people who may be willing to hurt you. But check this out, saints. Just as Jesus was kept in the wilderness, we can be kept in an evil society today. Today, we just want to remind you that even though we are in the wilderness, God will protect you. God will protect you. The first point we want to pull out this passage, point number one. Young people, continue to take notes. Our STEM event is coming up soon. We're going to try the hibachi grill again. I want to take some kids to the hibachi grill, but I'm going to need some sermon notes, and I'm not talking from 2016. We want to go to the hibachi grill. Point number one, called to the wilderness. Point number one, called to the wilderness. The Greek word for wilderness, if you look it up, is eremos or eremos. It means wild wilderness or desert or desolate or deserted places or lonely regions. I don't know about you, church, but when I think about a wilderness, I don't think about Cox Arboretum or one of Dayton Metro Parks or a lush park with pretty landscapes or a park with cultivated bushes and trees or a place flowing with streams and lakes. But when I think of a wilderness, I think of a forest or a desert with sand, a place with very little, if any, water, a place with jagged rocks and scorched earth. Yet in Mark 1 and 12, we see where the Spirit compels Jesus to go where? To the wilderness. And guess what, church? Jesus wasn't the only person called to the wilderness. Look at Matthew 1 and 3. Matthew 1 and 3. NLT version tells us, in those days, John the Baptist came to the Judean wilderness. And what did he do? And began preaching. Verse 3, the prophet Isaiah was speaking about John when he said, he is a voice shouting in the wilderness. Church, John the Baptist was preaching where? In the wilderness. Jesus was compelled by the Spirit to go where? In the wilderness. What does this show us? Sometimes God will lead you into the wilderness. Sometimes God will lead you into a desert, into a solitary place, into a lonely region, not for your glory, but for His glory. God may lead you, church, into an unsafe place, a dangerous place, not for your glory, but for His glory. We looked at this before, but I still think it's incredible. John the Baptist was a great man. He was prophet. He's on record as being, it's recorded in the scriptures that one day he will come, and he came. Our prophet Isaiah said that John will be shouting about the Messiah. But where did the prophet Isaiah say that John will be shouting at? Did he say that John the Baptist, this great man, would be in a synagogue? Did John the Baptist say this great man would be in a church in a nice, warm environment with central air and central heat? The Bible tells us that John the Baptist would be preaching in the wilderness, a solitary place, a desert place, a lonely region. With all of his greatness, God placed John the Baptist in a place where, check this out, some people would have avoided with a passion. You know how it is. I ain't going to no wilderness. We say that now. If we go to a church with no air, I ain't going to that church. They ain't got no air. He was called to go into the wilderness. Check this out. This doesn't mean that John the Baptist wasn't called. It doesn't mean that he wasn't great. It doesn't mean that he wasn't anointed, because he was. But God called him for a work that was to be in the wilderness, not for John's glory, but for God's glory. Church, I know that you may want a nice big church now. I know you may want a mega church that seats 5,000 people. If you're called to preach or you're called to be a pastor, I know you want that nice big church first, the nice large congregation with income flowing in all the time. If you've been called to sing or even to go out and called to evangelize, I know you want to speak at all the big churches. I know you want to be able to sing at the big churches where it's televised all around the world. If God called you to feed the homeless, I know you want to go to the nice shelters, where they got the clean stock room in the best parts of town. But check this out. God may call you to a wilderness place. God may call you to the place where the neighborhood is bad, where the area is rough, where the church is small, where the building is in a poor condition, where things are rough. And check this out, just like John the Baptist, that doesn't mean that you weren't called for the work. It doesn't mean that you weren't anointed to do the work that God called you to do, because you are. But sometimes God will call you to a wilderness to serve. So I encourage you, church, be like John. Be like Jesus. If God calls you to a place of wilderness, God will be with you. So continue to do your work. And guess what? Do it with a smile. Do it with joy. I know you didn't want a church in DeSoto Bass, but you got it now. Do the work that God has called you to do. Look at Matthew 11 and 7. Matthew 11 and 7. Jesus is saying this to the people. Matthew 11 and 7. NLT tells us, as John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to talk to the crowds. Who was Jesus talking to? Not one person, not two people, not three people. Jesus is talking to crowds. When people came to see Jesus, it was a lot of people. So who was Jesus talking to? He's talking to crowds. Pastor Wise, it's important. I'll show you in a second. Jesus says, what kind of man did you, he's talking to crowds, go into the wilderness to see? Look at Mark 1 and 4. We read this before, but Mark 1 and 4. NLT version tells us this, Mark 1 and 4. This messenger was John the Baptist. The next sentence says, he was in the wilderness and preached that people should be baptized to show that they had repented of their sins and turned to God to be forgiven. Verse 5. All of Judea, check this out, including all the people of Jerusalem did what? Went out to see and hear John. Pastor, why is that important? Saints, despite being in the wilderness, despite being in a lonely region, despite being in a deserted place, the people still came to hear John. Pastor, why is that significant? I don't care where God has called you to work at. I don't care where God has called you to serve at. But if he called you to serve, God will send people to you in the wilderness. The average person would have thought, I can't preach in the wilderness. Why? Nobody's going to come. The average person would have thought, I can't preach in the wilderness. Ain't no chairs in the wilderness. There's no place to sit. There's no central air. It's going to be hot. It's going to be uncomfortable. There won't be places for me to buy food or drink. There won't be places to park. Y'all know how we are sometimes. You ain't got to raise your hand, but sometimes you've thought, I'm not going to that church. There's no place to park. I'm not going to that church because I'm not going to have a place to sit. I'm not going to that church because last time they didn't have no air, they didn't have no heat. I don't feel like being cold. I'm going to wait till we come back to Abundant Grace, but I'm not going to that church because they don't have these things. I'm going to be uncomfortable. But the scripture shows us, saints, if God called you to do a work and to serve for a season in the wilderness, God will be with you, number one. Secondly, God will send souls to your work, even if it's in the wilderness. Even in a deserted or remote place, God will send souls to your work, even in unsuitable conditions. Pastor Laverne, I hope you're listening. Keep on doing God's work. I know the city that you're in is remote. I know the town is small. At nighttime, saints, they ain't got a lot of street lights down there. I've seen the individuals that come to her service. It may not seem safe according to some. But Pastor, keep doing the work that God has called you to do. God can send souls even to the remote place. Deacon James, I know the passion that you have to help others, and I know that sometimes it requires that you go into neighborhoods of wilderness, but my brother, keep doing the work that God has called you to do. Abundant. Some people say we in the wilderness. Some people say we're in a remote place, a solitary place. I agree with them, but I love it. One person said you have to be intentional about coming here. This ain't a place you just turn up and find. I understand what they're saying. But church, keep doing the work that God has called you to do. God will send us souls even in a remote place. Church, if God called you to the wilderness, God will be with you in the wilderness. And most importantly, God will send souls to the wilderness. I had a meeting, I had a meeting downtown. I was meeting with the economic development individuals down there. I was telling them about a vision. I said I would love to have this building to be a business incubator, a place where entrepreneurs can come and they can rent out upstairs, and we can make $10,000, $20,000 a month just in leases by individuals renting out upstairs. And one of them said, well, location. They said it's kind of far out. It's not really, it's 4 to 5 minutes from a highway, but it's not right off the highway. Location can be an issue. Church, if God sent souls to John the Baptist in the wilderness, and check it out, it wasn't, the scripture we saw, it said crowds. All of Judea, all of Jerusalem. If God can send many souls to the wilderness then, he can still do it now. If God called you to the wilderness, church, God will be with you in the wilderness. Second point we want to pull out this passage, point number 2. Not only will God be with you in the wilderness, God will protect you in the wilderness. God can protect you in the wilderness. God can keep you in the wilderness and keep you from the elements in the wilderness. God can keep you in remote places, and he can keep you from the elements of remoteness. What are you saying, Pastor? Whether it's heat or dearth or wild animals, God can keep you from the elements of the wilderness and give you peace with those things. Jesus was among the wild animals, yet God protected him. Mark 1:13, we read it earlier, but it said that where he was tempted by Satan for 40 days, but then it says he was out among the wild animals, and the angels took care of him. Most of us as city folk, we grew up in the city, we used to city, but city folk, we may forget that there's not just animals, but there's some wild animals in the wilderness. And sometimes we hear reports that maybe a coyote has ventured into our city land. But there's wild animal, saints, in the wilderness. A couple months back, I was back out, and I was not back out, but I was in Montana a couple months back, and you heard reports of wild elk strolling the area. I heard stories of bears coming out the mountains into the cities. And then someone showed me a Ring video on her camera of a mountain lion passing through somebody's yard. Mountain lion. Believers, in the wilderness, in the woods, there are dangerous animals that will love to have you for dinner. It's all in the wilderness. Yet, this verse tells us that when Jesus was in the wilderness, he was out among the wild animals, and the angels took care of him. Believers, even if you're in the wilderness, God will protect you. Look at Psalms 91. Psalms 91. I wish I had time. Not that I wish I can make time for it, but one day we may come back and just walk through this passage. It's a wonderful piece. But Psalms 91, verse 1 tells us, NLT version tells us this: those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge. Come on, David. my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust him. Verse 3, for he will rescue you from every trap and protect you from deadly disease. You ain't got to worry about no coronavirus. Come on, saints. Verse 4, he will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are your armor and protection. Verse 5, do not be afraid of the terrors of the night, nor the arrow that flies in the day. Do not dread the disease that stalks in darkness, nor the disaster that strikes at midday. Verse 7, though 1,000 fall at your side, though 10,000 are dying around you, these evils will not touch you. Just open your eyes and see how the wicked are punished. Verse 9, if you make the Lord your refuge, if you make the Most High your shelter, no evil will conquer you, no plague will come near your home. Look at verse 11. For he will order his angels to protect you wherever you go. They will hold you up with their hands so that you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. I'm thinking about that testimony of Mama right here. Fell on the table. The glass didn't break. They will hold you up with their hands so that you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. You will trample upon lions and cobras. You will crush fierce lions and serpents under your feet. What a tremendous reading. I really wanted to focus on verse 12. Verse 12 says where we see where God will order his angels to protect you wherever you go. They will hold you up with their hands so that you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. Did you know that God cares so much about you that he can dispatch his angels to make sure that you don't even hurt your foot on a stone? You might be thinking, Pastor, I never saw an angel catch me, but have you ever tripped and you didn't fall? Have you ever almost ran into a car? Did you almost walk into a wall, but you didn't? Don't say that you were lucky, but thank God for his angels protecting you. God sent even angels to take care of the Lord when he was in the wilderness. When you are in our modern day wilderness, this evil world that we live in, God can order his angels to protect you, even if you're out among the wild animals, the wild people. God can protect you. Sometimes we forget how dangerous the wilderness can be. If you look at Deuteronomy 8 and 15, Moses is telling the people, he tells them, do not forget that he led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its poisonous snakes and scorpions, where it was so hot and dry, he gave you water from the rock. Even when Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, they could have been subject to attacks from wild animals, wild creatures, but God protected them. So Moses is saying, yo, my brother, don't forget. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't you, but it was God who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its poisonous snakes and scorpions. These scriptures could have killed you, but God protected you. And in the same fashion, God can protect us from wild animals, from dangerous creatures, from dangerous people that exist in the world today. Isn't it amazing how God made certain animals nocturnal? What does nocturnal mean? They do their business as night. So we live in the day and we go to sleep. The Lord's allowed the animals to come out at nighttime to feed and do other things so we don't impact them and vice versa. But there's still dangerous animals and dangerous people out in this world. Look at 2 Timothy 3 and 1. 2 Timothy 3 and 1. Just like we shouldn't forget, just like Moses was encouraging the people not to forget about the dangerous creatures that they could have encountered, we shouldn't forget about the dangerous creatures and animals and people we can encounter in these times. 1 Timothy 3 and 1 says, you should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times. For people will only love themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. You work around people that act like this, or maybe ran into some people at school or seen people on the news that do things like this. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they would reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from people like that. Verse 13 says, but evil people and impostors will flourish. They will deceive others and will themselves be deceived. In this passage, it reminds us that in the last days, it's going to be difficult times. Now, when I was coming up, they would tell us that we're in the last days. In the last days. I remember when I was coming up, they had David Koresh and his cult. They would say we live in the last days. Then I remember when we was about to go to war with Muammar Gaddafi. Anybody remember? My older saints, yeah. They was like, we about to go to war. And somebody would say, well, you know, the Bible said in the last days there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. They said that back then, and now they're even saying it now. Yesterday I saw that Antarctica, which is normally a very cold part of America, reported a high temperature of 64.9 degrees in Antarctica. Church is getting wild. It's getting worse in the world. I'm not saying it's the last days, because the Bible says no man knows the day or the hour. But 2 Timothy reminds us that in the last days there's going to be difficult times. People are going to only love themselves. They're going to be boastful. They're going to be proud. They'll betray their friends. They're going to be cruel. They're going to hate what is good. There's going to be evil people and imposters, and they will flourish. Sometimes we can watch the news and you think, how could somebody do that to another human being? How can somebody do that to another person? The Bible told us that it would get like this. These are the kinds of people that we see in this evil world, in this evil wilderness. So guess what? There's no need to be surprised when you see people like this on the news. Why? Because the Bible told us there'll be people like this in the last days. We've heard instances on the news where people have the gall to walk into somebody's house, go through somebody's window, and snatch a child. We've seen videotapes of people grabbing kids on the street in broad daylight. I saw a Ring video on one of the television stations. A car was speeding off, and you just heard this blood-curdling scream from this woman. I hope they found the woman, but her scream, you just felt for her because she knew her life was in danger. I even saw a video of a man walking into a church and pulling out a shotgun and just shooting a parishioner. Sometimes I think we can barely go into the Dollar General store. You just trying to go in there and get a bag of chips, $1 bag of candy. You just planning to spend $3 and somebody in there trying to rob the store. Church, we live in an evil world, an evil wilderness. But I thank God for Psalms 91 and 14. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. When they call on me, I will answer. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue and honor them. I will reward them with long life and give them my salvation. Church, God will rescue those who love him. God will protect those who trust in his name. Just like Jesus was out among the wild animals and God protected him, God can protect us, church, from the wild animals and wild people that's in the wilderness today. And because of that, we have point number 3. Because God protects us, don't fear the wilderness. Don't fear the wilderness. I know our world is evil, and I know the wilderness that we live in. I know they have wicked people, and I know it's only going to get worse and worse. But check it out. It doesn't mean that you as a believer have to fear going out into the evil wilderness. You don't have to be afraid to go out into this evil wilderness. you continue to trust in God and keep his commandments, trust in him and believe in him, church, God will protect you. Don't be afraid to venture out into the wilderness. God can be with you in the wilderness. Psalms 91 and 5 told us we don't have to be afraid of the terrors by night. Why? Because God will protect you. Now, I'm not telling you to be not wise. Women, I don't want you going out shopping late at night. I don't want you being out not wise. I still want you to be smart. My point is you don't have to fear going out because of the evil world, but still be smart. Still be smart. Fear is a human emotion. So sometimes, guess what? We're going to feel fear. You're not the first individual to feel fear. Look at 1 Kings 19 and 1. 1 Kings 19 and 1. Story about a famous prophet named Elijah. This brother was bad. Elijah was bad in a good way. 1 Kings 19 and 1. When Ahab got home, he told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed all the prophets of Baal. Verse 2. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. May the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you killed them. Look at verse 3, what the passage says. Elijah, this man prayed and fire fell down from heaven. This brother was cold. Verse 3 tells us so. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Verse 4. Then he went on alone. Look at where Elijah goes. Into the wilderness. Traveling all day, he sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. Then he laid down and slept under the broom tree. But check this out. But as he was sleeping, who came? An angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. And he looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Verse 7. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. We see this great prophet, this great man of God who was afraid, and he ran for his life. If you look at the chapter before, you'll see where he encountered these prophets of Baal, and he asked them, choose ye this day whom you will serve. But he prays, and fire comes down from heaven. Powerful man of God. But in his moment of fear, he runs. And where does he venture to? The wilderness. But in his moment of despair, who did God send to help him? He sent angels. Remember the second point, Psalms 91:11, how God can have his angels, church, to protect you, to help you. Don't forget about your angels. If you continue reading, you'll see where God does protect Elijah, and he's with him. But believers, we don't have to have fear. We can trust in God. You don't have to fear going out into this world today, because God will protect you and keep you. Just like God was with Jesus, just like he was with Elijah, God can protect you and keep you from this evil world. 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us of this. I hope you highlight this, bookmark it, make a verse image, whatever you have to do to remember it. But 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God is not giving us a spirit of fear or timidity, to be timid. But he's given us a spirit but of power, love, and self-discipline. God hasn't given you a spirit of fear. So when you feel fear, ask God to take that spirit off of you. Because God hasn't given you this spirit. Your adversary wants you to be afraid, not God. God can keep you in the wilderness. God can keep you in this evil world. So don't be afraid to go out into the world. Trust that God will take care of you in an evil world. Some people are afraid to go out into society because they fear what could happen. Some people who've been a part of mass shootings, whether it's been in schools or public places, they avoid those things now. Why? Because they are fearful that it could happen again. I want to encourage you, church, just like Jesus was kept among wild animals, we can be kept from mass shootings. We never would have thought, well, now you got to think about it, but who in a million years would have thought that a mass shooting would happen in Dayton, Ohio? I remember we were in Nashville not Nashville, we were in Gatlinburg, just getting away for a couple of days. And I remember waking up that Sunday morning because the day before there was a mass shooting, I think, in El Paso, Texas, at the Walmart. So we saw that on the news, and I was like, man, that's so tragic, that's so trad. I hate to hear about that. So in the next morning, I woke up, and I think maybe Sheila and Taylor were up, and I heard somebody say mass shooting, and I heard Dayton, and I was like, hogwash. No way in the world they're talking about our Dayton. And then I turned my phone on, and then I started seeing text messages. I think my dad was like, I'm safe. I'm like, huh? Who's talking about somebody safe? And then somebody who works with me from out of state, I think I got a text message, hope you guys are fine. I'm like, fine for what? And I was, what do you got? Then I saw the news, and I was like, oh, my gosh. Mass shootings. But we don't have to fear those things, church. God can be with us in mass shootings. He can be with us in home invasions. He can be with us in carjackings. He can protect us from being shot at the mall. It's sad to think that I can't even go to a carnival, go shopping at the mall without a threat of being shot. God can be with us. Don't become a hermit. Keep on living. Keep on shopping. Keep on going out in public. You want to have fun? Go out and have fun with your family. God can protect you. And check this out. Even if you have to visit a bad part of town, even if you have a job working in a bad neighborhood, or maybe you go to a school in a bad school district, God can keep you in the wild. Don't fear. Don't stay at home all day. Well, I would go to the movies with y'all, but you never know. So I'm just going to stay here and watch my Cody. No, go out. It's okay. Be great. Live your best life. Why? God can protect you. God can keep you. Don't be afraid to go out into this evil world. Don't be afraid to go out into the wilderness. Last point, we're going to bring out point number 4, point number 4. God can protect you in the wilderness. He can keep you in the wilderness. He can call you to the wilderness. He can protect you in the wilderness. But I need you to stay alert in the wilderness. I need you to stay alert. 1 Peter 5 and 8 tells us this. NLT version, first 2 words, it says, stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Church, please, in this evil wilderness, remember to stay alert. Why? Because the devil is looking for someone to eat. We talked about this last week. I want to remind you, the devil is looking for someone to consume. I saw a story on the internet where this woman gets into her car, and there was a shirt that was wrapped around her windshield wiper. So the first thing she thought was that somebody wants me to get out the car, remove the shirt, so they can attack me. So what she did was she drove to another location before she removed the shirt. Then I heard a story, and I can't collaborate this because this week at work, I had a human trafficking liaison for the county to come in and speak to us about human trafficking. And she was saying that she felt that some of the stories about church buses and human trafficking and stuff, she didn't think it was true because of the fact that the way their financial model works, they're more concerned about money than grabbing people from churches. So I can't authenticate this story, but I've heard incidents of where people will have raw eggs put on their windshield. Am I the only one? Nobody else? I'm not, okay, I must be watching the wrong news channels then. I need to start watching. Maybe I need to get cable and watch what y'all watching because I'm watching the wrong stuff or I'm reading the wrong stuff. But I believe I saw someplace where people may put, like throw an egg at your windshield. And then when you use your fluid or your water to get it off, it's going to make it worse and you won't be able to see. So then you get out the car and try to clean it, and then they try to snatch you. So maybe I'm looking at the wrong news. Maybe that was something else. But when people do these things, these are tricks trying to get you out the car so they can hurt you. It's also important to know that children are being enticed into human trafficking in schools. So if they already have somebody working for them, they'll send them into your school with your child to try to convince them maybe to run away or to come with their John so they can be caught up in the network. It's important, church, that we stay alert. Be aware. Pray for God's protection. I hope that you pray for your children. Every day they go out, Lord, please be with my family, Lord. Here at church, every Sabbath day, we try to have prayer for our youth. We should be running in here for that prayer of protection. I don't understand why people want to mope all, take their, we praying for protection of your kids. I want to make sure my son front and center. The devil is prowling. This verse tells us to stay alert. I remember when my wife was expecting our daughter, back in 98, cell phones was just coming out. I got a cell phone from my wife so that if an emergency were to happen, she can get in contact with someone fast. But it's amazing how this device that was once touted for use in emergencies can now be a source of distractions to cause you to be in an emergency. If you go to the mall and you get out your car, and the first thing you do when you get out your car is doing this, and then when you walk in the mall, all you're doing is this. Then you go to leave the mall, all you're doing is this. People are looking for people who are distracted. They prey on people who aren't paying attention. Put your phone up because people are on the prowl looking for people to take it. I don't understand why you can't go 10 minutes without your phone. We did it when we was coming up. You're going to get that many messages in the next 10 minutes that you just can't wait to look at it later. Sometimes my son, well, I won't say my son. Sometimes one of my kids get in the car. Could be my son, could be my daughter. And the first thing they do, they get on the phone. I said, put that phone up. Talk to me. You don't have to be so entrenched in a device all the time. I've seen crime shows. Pray for me. I know I like crime shows. But I've seen crime shows where somebody went missing. They show you the surveillance where somebody followed that person in, followed them in the mall, and then followed them straight to their car and abducted them. Stay alert. Be aware of your surroundings. We are in the wilderness, so be aware of that. Be aware where you are. Keep your eyes up. We are in the world. It's important to be mindful of that we are in a bad, evil world. It used to be a time where people wanted to move out of the inner city to go to the suburbs. Why? Because they wanted a better life for their family. But now, the crimes that you see in the inner city, you see in the suburbs. Drug overdoses in the suburbs. Home invasions in the suburbs. Carjackings in the suburbs. Domestic violence in the suburbs. That poor young lady that died a few weeks ago, and she was unfortunately putting it in a trash compactor. That wasn't on Stewart Street. It wasn't on Germantown. It wasn't on Gettysburg Avenue. It was in the suburbs. Church, be alert wherever you are. Used to be a time where I even heard this on a crime show sometime. They would say, this used to be a city where we can leave our doors unlocked. I ain't never had that mindset. I grew up around the corner from Dunbar, man. I never had that mindset. We can leave the door unlocked. Always lock your doors. Roll your windows up. Some places I go, it be hot. Roll it up. I don't care if my hair don't work. Roll it up. You got to be alert. Don't take your location for granted. Oh, this is a nice area. We can leave our doors on. I can fall asleep with your window. Nope, unless you live on the second floor and ain't no way they can climb up, you better shut that window. My window's up. If you come to my house right now in 2020, on the second floor of my house, my windows got the lock on them. You're going to say, how they going to climb up here? I don't know, but they're smart. And they ain't getting over on me today. Lock your windows, roll your doors up. Don't take your location for granted. They won't come out here. They might. Lock your doors. Expect the unexpected. But most importantly, pray. Trust that God will take care of you. But it's important that we do our part, that we stay vigilant, we stay alert. But God will protect us, church. He will protect us, and he will be with us in the wilderness.